Hi and welcome back to the second part of the absolute or modulus function. I want to show you a couple of examples now of different types of functions. Again, it's a filter that can be applied to every single graph. So my second example here is that I've got the absolute value of x squared minus 2. Now my advice is to draw the stuff inside the absolute sign first. So draw x squared minus 2, and hopefully you'll be able to do that. I've got that down here in red. And then when I put the absolute sign over the top of it, it means that everything that was negative now becomes positive. So these lines here don't change at all, there and there, but all the points that were down here now become up there. So this one was 0, negative 2, that now becomes 0, 2. And all of these values get translated up like this. So all of this bit down here disappears, and all we're left with is that there. Now, generally speaking, in an exam, you just need to make sure that if you're going over another line that already exists, that you really make it clear. Because don't just go over it with a fine pen. Make sure you go over it once or twice. Don't feather it, like don't make it look ugly, but make sure it is very clear so that the examiners can see that you do include that one as well. Okay, I'll jump down. I'll skip this next example. We'll go to example 3. The previous example was one in the textbook, which I'll show you a bit later. So, again, I've got an absolute value, but not all of it's in the absolute value. So the plus 3 will be outside of that. So we need to do this bit inside the absolute value first. 1 on x minus 2. So it's a hyperbola. So my normal hyperbola looks like this. Okay, if you can see my screen. And then what happens is what we do is we make everything that was negative now becomes positive because of the absolute sign. So therefore this one down here turns into this one up here. It might look like a truncus, but it's not. A truncus, all of these are squared, and so these points are a little bit closer in, and these ones are a little bit further out. So it looks like a truncus, but it's actually not a truncus. And then what we need to do is, after we've got this shape here with the asymptotes, then all we do is we move the asymptote, the y asymptote up by 3. The whole graph is moved up by 3. So we finally get this one down here. So the x asymptote doesn't change, but the y asymptote changes a little bit. So we end up getting that sort of graph there. Hopefully this topic is not too tricky for you. Here's another question. The absolute value of x minus 2 all cubed minus 2. Now this time the minus 2 is inside the absolute value, so we have to draw all this first and then apply the absolute value to everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw this one. That's just a cubic, and I'll draw it up here. The cubic has a point of inflection at 2, negative 2, which is, that's not what I want. Sorry, I'll get there in a second. There we go. It's 2, negative 2 there. I could work out the y-intercept and the x-intercept. The y-intercept are relatively easy. Negative 2 cubed is negative 8 minus 2, which is negative 10. So that's 0, negative 10 down here. And the x-intercept, that one I have to do a bit of rearranging in my head. So that's going to be the cubed root of 2 plus 2. I ran out of room. Okay, but it doesn't really matter too much. But those are the 2 points. So the graph does look a little bit like that, sort of. Not a very good picture of the graph, but that's, hopefully you get the idea. Well, that's not a good idea. That's what it looks like. There's a point of inflection at that point there. That's not my final graph, so it doesn't really matter too much. It's my rough draft. Now I apply the absolute sign to this. It means that everything below this axis here, the x-axis, needs to change. So this point stays, but this point now becomes positive, and this point now becomes positive. And after I do all that, I end up getting a graph that looks something like this one down here. Where are we? There we go. Now I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff because I don't need this anymore. That was just my rough draft. Hopefully I can get rid of it. It's not behaving as I want it to. Okay, so then I've got this graph here. As you can see that it's still got a point of inflection there, and it goes up, the y-intercept is up here, and it goes up like that. Okay, so that's the absolute value sign for this graph. That's the second part. In the next part, I'll show you another question that you'll find in the textbook.